Welcome. I'm Senator Republican Leader Trey Stewart. I appreciate everybody coming today and joining my colleagues and I in the Senate Republican Caucus. What you can expect to see from us this coming session will be a weekly format such as this, where Tuesdays at either 12:30 or immediately following session, whichever happens first, you'll be able to get a briefing from us on the Senate Republican Caucus's policy priorities and our agenda as we roll it out throughout the session, as well as an opportunity to connect with us either directly with the leadership or the members themselves, and have time for some Q&A at the end of each one of these briefings as well. And so you can sort of plan for that as we move forward in a sort of a more routine format than maybe what you've experienced with us in the past. And I will say too that at the end of each of these we'll be sure to reserve time, and we can either talk about the topic of the day or anything that might be timely that you folks want to get our statements and our positions on, and we're happy to engage with you in that format. Jumping right in, you'll see that the topic of today's briefing is going to be what I think, and I think my colleagues would agree, is the single most important one that we're facing in state government right now, and that is around child welfare and the safety of our children who are more in the system, so to speak. There's been a lot of coverage about this subject lately, particularly on the heels of the Ombudsman's report. You'll have a chance today to hear from our colleagues who serve on both the Government Oversight Committee as well as the Health and Human Services Committee to talk about what our plans are and what our ideas are as it relates to that subject. My initial read in reviewing the documents that have been put out, and in fact hearing directly from my constituents back home in Aroostook County, is that there seems to be a significant gap in state government around the subject of reunification. That is one that I think we are collecting probably bad data on, one that we are not getting the right people involved with, and it's leading to bad outcomes. And that's bad outcomes on both sides of the spectrum, including reunification when it shouldn't happen and is, and reunification when it's not happening and needs to be. I think you'll hear more about that as well, but to me it jumped off the page in some of these reports, and even in the rebuttal issued by the department, as more of an arbitrary process than anything else, and one that we really need to be collecting better data on and going to stronger sources for that information before a determination is made, rather than just doing it and going through the motions for the sake of doing it, even when it's not in the best interest of the child. I also think that, and I think you'll hear some of my colleagues speak about this as well, that the treatment of foster families and our grandparents needs to be addressed by the state of Maine as we move forward. There are good families out there that want to help, and we need to be doing what we can to empower them in state government rather than penalizing them, and at the very least keeping our promises to those folks. With that, we've got a number of ideas that we want to go through today, so I won't belabor it anymore. I am going to turn it over now to Senator Jeff Timberlake, who can speak about a couple of ideas that he has.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. Thank you for being here. My name is Senator Jeff Timberlake. I represent District 17. I have been very active with the child welfare issues, as most of you know, over the last year or two. In a number of years, I've served on the Government Oversight Committee. I've sponsored two pieces of legislation this year in this area. An act to provide documents obtained by subpoena by the Government Oversight Committee may be reviewed by committee members and staff. It's very difficult at this point in time for the Government Oversight Committee to do their work if they cannot review the records that the committee has subpoenaed. I feel this is very important in order for us to get to the root to some of the problems that we see. This may not be only with the Department of Human Services in the future, but anything. The Government Oversight Committee, if you talk to David Trahan, the Honorable David Trahan, when he was here, when he helped set up that committee, it was one of the things that he never intended that the Government Oversight Committee wouldn't have this ability. So I believe that it was when it was originally formed, was what was supposed to be part of the legislation. The second piece of legislation that I'm sponsoring this year is an act to separate the Department of Child and Family Services. It was the same bill that Senator Diamond put in the last session. It's sponsored by me, it passed by the Senate, and it failed last time because it got killed in the House. The DHHS ran down to the House and somehow got a bill that passed in the Senate by, I think, around 22 to 13 or 22 to 12 or something like that. There is a big need for this. Those of you who know me, who know I've been around here, this is my 13th year serving in the legislature. When Governor LePage was here, I was one of the key sponsors of the bill to merge the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Conservation. It was the worst idea I ever had. I'm here to admit I was wrong. So I think this was wrong when it was done in 2004, when this was put in by the Baldacci administration, when they were merged. I think it's time to separate the Department of Office of Child and Family Services from the Department of Health and Human Services and create two different departments that can more easily be overseen. I've just met with some foster parents and some grandparents who lost grandchildren who are in the system. And, you know, we need to do everything we can to make sure that we do not lose another child here in the state of Maine. I think that's what every one of us stand here for. It's very heartbreaking. I stood here today, earlier this morning, beside Maddox Williams' grandmother, and to watch her cry, and she's told me the story a number of times. It's very sad, and we need to find a way to stop it. We're not here to point fingers, to do those things. We need to find a solution to a problem. We need to get there. And so with that, Stuart, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great. Thank you. Next, we'll have Senator Moore, who is our lead Republican on the Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Good afternoon, I'm Mary Ann Moore, and I represent Senate District 6, which is all of Washington County, as well as 16 communities in eastern Hancock County as well. And as Senator Stewart mentioned, I serve as the Senate lead on the Health and Human Services Committee. And I think one of our priorities, and has continued to be our priorities, is that we want to see operational improvement with the Health and Human Services Committee. We are the oversight of the department itself, and I think that we have been working with them and trying to identify some improvements that are desperately needed. And again, the importance is that we want to evaluate and reach our current programs and foster better results with our strong families. So some of the things that we are encouraging is to evaluate the implementation of evidence-based child welfare practices and approaches. The department is working on it, but we're not there yet. We want them to expand that formal foundations training programs and reinstate supervisory training. We started the first cohort, I believe, was a year ago. It still needs work. We still need to have some trained caseworkers. We're sending these young caseworkers out there to do a job where they're just out of college. They may not have the experience, and we really do need to have that, and they need the supervisory guidance as to what's going on with that. I think we need to allow the caseworkers access to medical information through official means, just as Senator Timberlake was mentioning. And we also need to expand the mental and health substance use programs that our parents are having to face. If we're going to look at reunification, we want to make sure that that is a very good plan that we're going to be working with, and we're not just throwing something at it. I have introduced several bills. We have quite a few different handful of legislation that's been introduced. One of ours, last year, the last committee, we had 4 bills that were talking about revising and improving the department. We combined them all into one, and one of the first things that we required is that we want to hear from the citizen review panels. We want a report from them. They were all in different silos. So we required them to report to us quarterly. All of the 3 citizen review panels, the ombudsman, and the department. The first 2 meetings were outstanding. They were talking to each other, they were comparing notes, and they were finding things going, oh, are you guys doing that? I didn't realize we were also doing that. So there was a lot of communication that was not occurring between the panels, and we feel that that was very, very important. The legislation that we passed last year did have a sunset on it, where it was going to expire in 2024. My bill is actually extending that, where we will continue ongoing quarterly reporting between the citizen review panels and the department and the ombudsman, so that we can continue to work on and make improvements to the operation overall. So I think it's really important. I know we were talking about foster parents. There is a, what they call resource parents bill of rights policy that needs to be reviewed. And so that's one of the things that I've also put in a bill that we're looking at, we're saying let's take a look at the shortcomings of that policy and go from there. So again, as a member of the HHS committee, we stand to really hold their feet to the wire and make sure that they are doing everything that we possibly can to make sure that we don't have lose another child, especially even on Christmas Day, for something like that. Thank you.
Next up will be Senator Lisa Keim, who's the Assistant Republican Leader and is also our lead member on the Government Oversight Committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Keim, and I represent Senate District 19, which is Northern Oxford and Northern Franklin County. And yes, as Senator Stewart mentioned, I do serve on the Government Oversight Committee and have been on there for 6 years. And broadly speaking, we're the Committee of Oversight. We oversee the executive branch and the bureaucracy of government. And especially when operations are failing, that's when often things rise up to give us an opportunity to look deeper into what's happening and try to find solutions that even the committees of jurisdictions, we have a greater look because we can subpoena records. We have an investigative team in OPEGA who goes and dives into records to get us answers. So recently the Ombudsman report was given to us, which really shows more of the same of why the Government Oversight Committee is investigating Child Protective Services. And what's so shocking about the recent Ombudsman report is not necessarily what's in it, which is shocking, but really that it is more of the same. We have had report after report that continue to come out and show that Child Protective really has not made any recognizable improvements as can be measured by outcomes. So children in Maine are not being kept safe. Our children are dying. The response to this report by the department was really deflection and minimization. I found that very concerning. The response to every issue, it seems, that's been brought to the department, it's generally met by them telling us about a new program that they're starting, and there's always a timeline out into the future of when that program is going to be implemented and what we can expect for improvements once the program's implemented. But this has been going on for years, and there's always a new program. We need to demand greater transparency in the department, and that's what we're doing with government oversight. We just had a recent vote to appeal the Superior Court decision to the law court, and that process is going to take a long time probably. The court is definitely backlogged, but we want to move forward and get the records. It is really preposterous to think that as the Committee of Oversight that we would not be allowed to see the raw data, the actual files that our staff is looking at to create the reports. We need to see that. So that's one avenue that we're going for with greater transparency. The other one, as you heard Senator Timberlake mention, and there's some other bills that actually are going to make it clear in statute that we have access to whatever files that are confidential, that if we want to subpoena them. These are essential steps, and both of them are uncertain, right? Because we don't know what's going to pass in this building for law. But I will say that I am calling on my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because essentially the Democrats are running this building. We have to have oversight, we have to have transparency, and they need to help us move these bills forward so that we are holding the executive branch accountable for whatever is happening in the department that needs to be fixed. So this is essential for us. I want to reiterate a little bit what Senator Moore said about caseworkers. We don't have enough. The work they do is incredibly essential. And none of us are standing here to point fingers at those frontline people who are doing the really grueling and heartbreaking work that they're doing. We need them, and we need more of them. So if anyone wants, to do that work, we're begging for them. But as it stands right now, we can't continue work as usual. Things are falling apart in the child protection system, and it's up to us to create greater accountability in that. Thank you for your time.
much, Lisa. And rounding out our list of scheduled speakers for today is Senator Bennett, who also serves on the Government Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. I'm Rick Bennett. I have the honor of serving District, is it 19? 18. Senator Kime and I switched numbers. Senator 8, District 18, which is 14 towns in western Maine, Oxford Hills, the greater Freiburg area, the Lakes region of Cumberland County. I just want to add a couple of things. First of all, this is an issue which touches far too many families in Maine. I hear from constituents, as we all do, who have been in the buzzsaw of this system. People who have had their kids taken away possibly without due diligence. I hear a lot of that. And then we hear these other tragic stories where reunification was the wrong decision. It is a tough, tough area of policymaking. And I think at its essence, we need better accountability. And that's what we've heard today. I've got a bill in, like Senator Timberlake, I'll be letting him take the lead on this measure, which Senator Diamond put in and got good, solid support in the Senate to separate out the Department of Children and Family Services as a separate department. I think that's critical. If you look at the way the system works within DHHS, not only in child welfare, but in a host of areas, they're their own adjudicators. When a citizen has a dispute, they have to go before a hearing officer who works ultimately for the Commissioner of DHHS. This is not an effective system. We need to fix the lines of accountability in the Department of Human Services. And we've got lots of ideas on how to do that, and I stand ready to work with people across the aisle and the administration to fix this broken system. I'm also, as you know, the Senate lead on the Appropriations Committee. And to anticipate a question, I stand ready, and my Republican colleagues here stand ready to provide funding. There's money in the budget the governor's proposed. We need to make sure it is well-spent money. Throwing money at this without fundamental reforms in accountability and transparency and alignment so that we can have a system that works better is not money well spent. We've already appropriated lots of money. They're having a hard time recruiting people for the available positions that are already funded. We need to solve that problem. Caseworkers have tremendous turnover. The attrition rate, as you would expect in a job like that, is astonishingly high, and we need to fix the system in that way. We are here to be constructive, to provide available funding where it's needed, but to hold accountable the spending so that it solves the problem and people don't just feel good because we threw some more money at this critical issue. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back to Senator Stewart, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks everyone who had an opportunity to weigh in here, and I would just echo particularly Senator Bennett's remarks that we as an entire caucus look forward to working with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and frankly in the governor's office to come up with real meaningful solutions that are going to get our number of child fatalities hopefully down to zero, because that is what success looks like. Success is not more money in the budget or an expansion of government here or there. Success is when no more children are dying in the state of Maine that are within the system. So with that, I am happy to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions about this or any other subject.
Do any of the bills that you have all talked about today have any Democratic co-sponsors? And if not, did you ask and did they refuse? That's number one. And number two, does the Office of Child and Family Services need an independent inspector general to ensure accountability? I believe Senator Baldacci may be proposing a bill along those lines.
I'll let individuals chime in if they do have Democratic co-sponsors. I know many of these bills are not yet written. I think we're up to around 200 or so out of the 2,300 plus. Certainly we're interested in pursuing that bill.
I've got at least one, if not two, going on to one. Huh?
Will you name names, or are you gonna wait till
I'm
it's?
gonna wait till the name is on the paper.
Okay.
Sign, seal, and deliver.
Signed, sealed, and delivered.
Short answer to your first question is yes.
Okay.
To your
Yes.
second question, that's a really interesting idea. I defer to my colleagues that are on the policy area committee to pursue that. And I'd also ask, is that a bill that we're anticipating seeing from someone, or?
Yeah, I think Baldacci mentioned that that was the direction he wanted to go, but I
If
don't
any
know.
GOC members want to respond, or, you know.
I missed the question, so.
Yeah, well, I would just simply say, I look forward to working with people of all sides of the aisle on this, on all, whatever mix. I prefer to do everything in a bipartisan fashion. There's far too much partisanship in this building, and on this issue, there should be absolutely none.
Right.
And I'm committed to that, and I think we all are. I think an idea like that has merit, but what does it say about the system that we need to create yet another agency to oversee a dysfunctional agency? We've got a child ombudsman's office, which is already working in this area, and that doesn't work. Again, they're part of DHHS. There's some structural reforms that need to be taken. I'm open to any idea, and the Inspector General, if necessary, if advisable, I'm all for it, personally.
Thanks, Rick.
Can you
Also
give
second.
some specifics about what would be accomplished by breaking Child and Family Services off into its separate agency?
Sure. I can speak to that, and happy to hand it off to anybody else that wants to weigh in as well. But the Department of Health and Human Services is the largest organization in the state of Maine. Okay. To suggest that we know exactly what's going on in that department on any given day, and that balls aren't being dropped just from the sheer size and vastness of it, I think is kind of a laughable idea. Obviously, things are going to get missed. The problem is that when things get missed in this particular area, it results in horrific outcomes. And those are outcomes that should be avoided at any and all costs. And if that involves separating or pulling out this crucial element that's within that department, which until not long ago they weren't actually merged. And I think for the sake of trying to find efficiencies, we lost touch with the most important element, and it's that we're trying to protect children. And so I think heading back towards that model of prioritizing children and their safety is so much more important than coming up with some sort of economies of scale within the government bureaucracy. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I would add to that too, that
Jump right in.
that at the Government Oversight Committee, sometimes we've had Dr. Landry show up, and then sometimes we have Jean Lambert show up. And just that, I think there needs to be one person that's accountable and that comes to us and really, the buck stops there, right? And instead of just this never-ending sort of cascade of who is in charge. So there's, it's trying to deal with the opacity issue, right? Just make sure that we are providing transparency. Go ahead, Senator Chimney.
To me, I think it falls very simply around, almost every one of you have worked for either a small company or a small paper or something, and then you moved up into a bigger company. Every time you move up into a bigger company or something, the efficiency goes away, the personal touch goes away. We're talking about the personal touch with children, which is something that's, over the last year has been, we've set records. And we know that when we did it in the Department of Ag, it took away all of the personal touches there. That hasn't worked anywhere near as efficiency as it did before. I think we can get efficiency, we can find people that we can talk to. I think we can carry more people responsible, because it won't be the largest department in the state of Maine. And I think that's a real problem. And this is about anybody that's ever worked for the little small company, when you can go find the boss, talk to him, have a conversation, and rectify a problem. And this is about rectifying a problem. Folks, this is a problem. These children were taken away at some point in time and then given back in every case. And this is about a problem that needs to be solved. And we need to find out where the problem is. And I think you got to get in the nitty-gritty, and that's what we got to do.
In the governor's budget proposal, I think this may be a good question for Senator Bennett or anyone, she proposed $15 million for child welfare issues, but particularly for adoption and foster care issues. You know, can that money be spent better, in your opinion?
Jeff, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Well, it certainly can be, but one of the complaints that Senator Timberlake was sharing with me earlier, and I've heard it too, is foster care parents. It's not a problem of money, it's a problem of getting paid. Money can be appropriated, but if it takes 6 months to get to people, it's a problem across state government. It's not solving the problem. So people can feel good about allocating the funds, appropriating the funds. We need to make sure that it's being deployed in a timely fashion to the people who need the help. So that's the first answer. And then the rest of it with respect to the amounts, there's a lot of, there's not a lot of definition within the budget as yet that says how that money is specifically going to be spent. When I'm sitting in Appropriations Committee, I expect to be asking lots of questions about that, because I think we all, you as representatives of the caring public, and I as a representative of my constituents, need to understand really how is the money being spent. $50 million, big round number is 15, 50, you know, whatever the number is. What does it mean? What does it actually mean for solving the problem?
You said that the treatment of foster parents needs to improve. Can you specify what you meant by that with like examples?
Right. Actually, fairly nice graphic here from constituents of mine who stepped up and became foster parents. I'm not going to disclose who they are today, but they do live in University County, and shared with me the basically treatment that they received from the quote-unquote system, and that's what I'll call it, because it wasn't any one actor in particular from my takeaway. But in addition to us not keeping our word in state government and actually paying these people who have stepped up what they are owed, there's other issues that tag along with that. And I think you're seeing, and it goes back to what I said earlier about reunification for the sake of reunification, rather than what's in the best interest of the child, and not including those foster parents in some of those conversations that really, really matter. Because they might be the best source of information that can advocate the best and the most effectively for that child, and yet they're boxed out because of the arbitrary nature of the way that we do things right now. So that's more or less what I was implying there.
To clarify, you're saying that their payments are being delayed as well. They're not included in the conversation for reunification.
Right, and I think my colleague has something to add to that as well. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in church on Sunday, actually, a woman who's just a fabulous parent, resource parent, foster parent, you know, I pulled her aside and asked her, you know, to talk with me a little bit. And foster families are sharing with us far and wide, like you've heard about not getting paid, right? That's egregious. But also they are afraid to complain too much because there is retaliation. And these families take in children that they love, right? They grow to love these children. And to think that if they are honest about the failures in the system, that the department then retaliates against them and pulls the children away, they're staying silent for that reason. And these are our friends and neighbors that are doing this, taking on this work that is incredibly hard, but being very careful and almost silent, because they have to work with those people that have ultimate control of the kids.
Question, I guess, especially for the government oversight committee members. Obviously, a lot of what you're talking about is accountability and transparency. I mean, I know there's the legal dispute with the department right now, but how would you characterize the way the department has been working with the committee and the legislature so far? There has been a lot of bills that have been introduced, a lot of funding put towards child welfare over the past couple of years. Are you seeing progress, or you still feel like the department is not working well with the legislature?
Well, we have given, you know, more increased funding for positions, but it's the same where across the state, right? It's very difficult to hire anyone, and then especially you know, for these caseworkers, that's a really tough job. So they aren't able to fill the positions. I would say we've definitely in good faith given them, you know, what they've asked for. And as far as, you know, working with us, they've worked well with OPEGA. They've definitely handed over the documents and, you know, upheld that part. They've pushed back. Obviously, we subpoenaed records and they said no. And we're working that through the courts and then through legislation. So I think there definitely could be more. I am disappointed to see that Dr. Landry, you know, if he's the person in charge of Child Protective Services and we're doing investigations on, you know, his department and he doesn't show up, that's concerning to me, right? So I and to all of us, every single one of us on the committee, believe that he should be front and center when these types of things are being questioned and, you know, if they're serious problems. So for him to be absent is problematic.
It seems like the common idea is separating the two. What will it take to do so? And is there an agency, is there someone who's essentially opposing that?
The agency, the department is opposing it.
Jeff, go ahead and talk
Yeah.
about your
The-
history there.
Last time, the department has been opposing that bill. It opposed it in the last session, and I suspect it'll be opposing it in this session. Because, you know, everybody likes to have their umpire to work with. I'm gonna phrase it that way in my opinion, and that's what, you know, they don't like to break it up. And I think it's the best thing to do. I think in answer to your question, in my opinion, this is my opinion only, is that, you know, when Dr. Landry doesn't show up or Commissioner Lambert doesn't show up and they send one of their aides in, then it just gives them a reason to say, we'll have to get back to you. We'll have to get back to you. And it drags this process on and on and on for a process that doesn't need to be dragged on for as long as it did. And I think this is shown in the last session. The Government Oversight Committee was very bipartisan. It wasn't a partisan committee at all. I hope it continues that way. I've served on, this will be my fifth year, my third term. But I hope it stays that way because it's never been a partisan committee. I don't think it will be. I think everybody there is concerned. It's just been something that has been near and dear to our hearts in the Senate Republican office, and that's why we're here. But I think it could have gone better. I think the department could have worked with us more. I think the department could have given us more information. I think all of those things could have happened, but I think it's been intentionally dragged out. I said that when we started a year ago, that, you know, we needed to put all our resources into it. We should have an answer by last April, and it just kept getting pushed off and pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And I'm sorry, we're not going to set that answer. So I do think we could do better.
One last question, and then we got a wrap for the day, as folks have a couple places to go.
During the governor's budget presentation last week, she was asked about these issues, and she said that a top priority for her would be filling those vacant caseworker positions. I think she said about 60 that are open. I guess how important is that in this overall strategy, and are there things that you think the state needs to be doing that's not doing now to make sure those positions get filled?
So I think that is a problem that's not unique to this sector of the workforce. Unfortunately, it is a absolutely critical one though, and one that frankly too, from my vantage point, quality is more important than quantity in a lot of ways there too. And so not to discourage anybody from wanting to head into that sector and do that work, but we do need folks who are well trained and that are going to be able to effectively assess what the best options are for the children that they're responsible for. So to me, it's not just about filling positions for the sake of filling positions. I want to make sure that we've actually got competent, capable, and effective people there that really know how to advocate for the best interests of the children that they're responsible for.